Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Mallory Gott, or Mal, and I am the founder and creative director of G&A, an experiential design firm. If you're not sure what an experiential design firm is, have no fear. That is exactly what we're going to talk about today. Before we get started, since I often get this question when I present virtually, yes, these are flying pigs and they're wonderful. And yes, that is a llama, and her name is Charlotte, and she is also great. Those important details aside, welcome and thank you so much for spending some time with me during our session today. We're going to take about 45 to 60 minutes to discuss G&A's experiential design thinking framework. And as I said, if you're not quite sure what experience design thinking is, or if you've heard of experiential design, but you have an idea that it may be limited to adding some beautiful decor to a physical space, or perhaps creating a welcoming party environment, I'm here to dispel those myths for you. During the course of our 45 to 60 minutes together, we are going to go through an overview of the framework that we use with all of our clients, which include a number of professional associations, but also a wide variety of groups with experiences that need to be designed in completely different areas: retail and restaurant groups, private art galleries, individuals who are interested in designing experiences in their own lives. The wonderful thing about our experience design thinking framework is that it applies to all kinds of experiences. And as I said, I'll define that a little bit more clearly in just a few minutes. So the format of our session today is pretty straightforward. We're going to review learning objectives. Of course, you're likely familiar with those. I'm also going to go over doing objectives. As someone who has a master's degree in adult education and has been designing learning programs for quite some time and consuming them as well, it is super important to me that when someone takes the time to spend 60 minutes of their day, of their very busy day, learning something new, that it's crystal clear for them what they're going to be able to do at the conclusion of the session. So not only are we going to review those doing objectives at the beginning of the presentation today, we're also going to revisit them at the end of the presentation so that you're clear that yes, everything we said you would be able to do, we have covered. We'll go through the content of our session, of course. It'd be a little bit tricky to teach you how to do things if we didn't do that. And we'll conclude, after reviewing our doing objectives one more time, with a short list of action items and what's next steps that I would suggest you take if I were sitting with you in a boardroom or in a conference room, or if we were meeting one-on-one in a virtual environment. So that's what our presentation today is going to look like. The last thing that we'll make sure that you have before you wrap up today is information about where you can get a hold of us or how you can learn more about our framework, perhaps even go through the entirety of our online course yourself, or ask someone on your team to do it if you're so inclined. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get into the presentation. I'm going to share my screen, so hang on just one moment as I do that. And now you should be looking at my screen. So welcome to our session, Experiential Design Thinking, a million tiny touch points, one big dream. As I said, my name is Mal. And as you can see here, I do have that master's degree. It's legit. I'm also a certified association executive, and I'll go over a little bit more about my background in just a few moments. But let's go ahead and get into those learning objectives. So in today's session, you're going to learn who I am and why I'm qualified to teach you about this, what the term experience design thinking means, and how we here at G&A use that term with all of our clients, and how we've actually built an entire thinking framework around it. What our thinking framework is all about, and what you can do today to lay the groundwork to solve that unsolvable problem that you're up against. Whether that looks like a conference or trade show that you're trying to convert to a virtual environment, worrying about how to retain or attract a new membership base, perhaps how to reorganize or streamline your organizational structure internally, or even just how to enjoy a more pleasant day-to-day experience in the current world that we're living in. These are all experiences, and we'll give you some tools to start working on those unsolvable problems today. As far as our doing objectives go, after this session, you will be able to define experience design thinking and explain how it differs from two similar terms, experience design, and design thinking. Yes, I know that sounds like a lot of the same words over and over. Have no fear. We're going to review what each of those different terms means and how they are important to you. We're going to describe the 4 steps in our Define the Dream, Design the Dream, Experience Design Thinking framework, also known as our 4D framework. The words dream appear twice, and that is intentional. I'll touch on that as well, lest you be concerned that I am just a snake oil saleswoman. I am not. That is an integral part of the framework, and we'll talk a little bit about why the title is the way that it is. I'll explain the paradigm shift at the core of our XD thinking framework, and we'll discuss examples of the 4D framework in action. Now, those examples are in a few instances going to take the shape of some specific examples for professional associations, but they're also going to look like individual examples and anecdotal, just general analogies. And the reason for that is that I want to drive home for you, and I will touch on this several times throughout our time together today, that experience design thinking, the way that our framework is built, is intended to serve you as you solve an unsolvable problem, no matter what the experience is. So this framework is designed to be useful regardless of what type of organization you are, whether you're an individual looking to resolve an unsolvable problem, or a corporation, nonprofit, professional association, something that pertains to a specific area in your business, or the business strategy and culture as a whole. It is designed to be multifaceted, which is why our examples are going to be multifaceted as well. So without further ado, let's get into who the heck I am and why I'm qualified to teach you about this stuff. As I mentioned, I am the owner and creative director of G&A, an experiential design firm. I'm also the founder, in case that needs clarification. And what's important is that G&A is a real business with real clients for whom I have designed a number of real experiences. So I have designed experiences for healthcare associations, for education associations. I've designed them for other types of nonprofits. I've designed them for retail spaces, restaurant groups, art galleries, and individuals. There are a variety of organizations who have benefited from our work, and the framework that I'm going to review with you today is tried and true across all sectors and industries, as well as for personal and professional use. In addition, I have 15 plus years designing experiences for a number of groups before I built my own firm. So I have designed in these 5 areas: events, virtual and in person, spatial, pop-ups, sponsorship and trade show booths, even interiors for commercial and residential use. I've done digital design, content and marketing across a number of different media. Cultural design, as I mentioned, I have a master's degree. It's in adult education and organizational development, and I've done quite a bit of work looking at company cultures, organizational structures, and the like. And people experiences, everything from who you hire and how you hire them, and how they are presented with information about their journey as your employee, to customers and sponsors and what their experiences are like, to individuals who are interested in bettering their own experiences as on a personal or professional level. So yeah, I've done quite a bit of experiential design work in my life. And as you can see in the final bullet here, I have used this framework to redesign my entire life as well. Now, why does that matter in a presentation for people who are leading associations and medical societies? Well, as I mentioned, it matters because this experience design thinking framework works no matter what experience you're trying to design. So as you can see in the picture here, and by looking at me today, life is going pretty well. But that was not always the case. And it's an important part of how I built this framework and why I believe and know it to be so effective. Yesterday looked like this. And the reason I picked this photo as I share with groups that I present this information to is because essentially, someone set down a dish in front of me. It looked like this type of career, this type of life, this type of environment, et cetera, et cetera. And for you, it might look like an organizational structure that's been in place for some time, a series of products and services that are legacy with your organization, or for whom your members are, to whom, excuse me, they are quite valuable. It may look like a team structure that has been longstanding, perhaps specific employees who have been in their roles for quite a long time. Essentially, someone set that down in front of me and in front of you. And as they did, I simply ate what I could, so to speak, and took the leftovers home to reheat them, convincing myself that it was exactly what I wanted, that the soggy fries and the fatigue and all the other things that would be literally or figuratively considered leftovers were what I wanted. And it's because I had never considered cooking up something new for myself. Okay. As you can see here, I was working 80 plus hours a week, telling myself that that was the experience I wanted. This may look to you like quite a bit of the same at an organizational level. I traveled the world. I had the opportunity to go all over the place, but I never saw anything. Basically, I saw the inside of hotels and convention centers. And that too may appear to you as running from one finish line to the next to the next. Once we get through this financial close, once we get through our board meeting, once we've converted our conference into a new media, once we've figured out how to attract new members, or we've gone through our membership renewal cycle, then I'll finally be able to slow down and focus on designing the experience I want for my organization. Yeah, I sobbed frequently and spontaneously, and that one may literally be quite the same for you. And then I got fired. And that's always an interesting thing. People often wonder, why would you disclose that in this presentation? I disclose it because at an organizational level, it looks a lot like what's happening now. It looks like something completely out of my control that finally gave me the opportunity to lift my head up and recognize that I was not designing an experience that was in any way aligned with what I hoped my experience would be. For you, this probably looks something like COVID-19, or it could look like a seriously substantial decline in revenues, or something else that basically pulled you up short and gave you the opportunity, albeit somewhat painfully, to look at the experience that you were living and recognize that it was perhaps in no way aligned with the experience that you had hoped to design and create. So where did I go from here? Well, as I said, I struck out on my own and have since designed an entirely new experience, not only for myself, but by using the same framework, I have designed it for numerous others. So let's talk about how I did that, and how you can too. As I mentioned, there are some terms which you've likely heard. So you may be familiar with the idea of experience design. Experience design is often associated with events, whether physical or virtual. It is typically associated with something that is a finite duration, and that is a phenomena for which there is a clear start and end. So whether you're hosting a virtual conference or a live event, or a customer launch party, or some sort of experience that serves you on a personal level, you'll often look at experience design and think, this is where we put in the cool flashes and the cool touches. This is where we perhaps introduce a marginal amount of interactivity, but it's limited to focusing on this particular subject for a finite duration of time to create this phenomena that we are going to say starts and ends here, and that's really about it. It is not bad in any way. In fact, it can be quite beneficial as a starting point toward experience design thinking as we look at it. And frankly, any improvement is a good one and a welcome one. But this philosophical approach to how you design these phenomena with finite durations is relatively limited to just those things. On the right, you can see we have design thinking. This too is a term that's been around and a process that's been in use for some time. Typically, it is associated with something product-oriented, whether physical or digital. These are things like what you experience when you're engineering new packaging, or the reason that someone understands that when you see a door handle versus a flat surface, you know to push or pull. These are all designed to elicit a certain series of actions, and whether or not it's in a physical space, like the example of our door, or in a digital space like a website where you would look at user experience and design the features and functionality of a digital menu, you are solving a problem specific to something with a relatively singular application. So once you've solved the push-pull, or you understand how to set up a menu so that someone clicks through to the most frequently visited pages, you've essentially completed the problem solving for that design application. There's not likely going to be another application of the same design to some other subject area or a different product, or, so on and so forth. Tends to be relatively singular. In both of these cases, if I were to sum them up, I view these terms as I think, therefore I can. I think, I am analytical, I am logical, I am process-oriented first. Therefore, I am able to solve a problem second. Neither of these, as I said, is inherently bad. And each of them moves us forward in an important way. It gets us open to the possibility of thinking differently and moving outside of our typical patterns of processing. However, as I mentioned, they are both analytical and logically based first. And what I'm suggesting as we move forward is a complete shift to a very different model of orientation in our thinking. And in fact, it's not even an orientation in our thinking at all. So experience design thinking, which is a term that often isn't used at all because it's really the amalgam of the two previous terms that I have put together, is one that is first and foremost experientially oriented. An experience is anything. When you get out of bed in the morning, when you go into your virtual office or physical office or coffee shop, you are having experiences. When you interact with a board, when you send out emails to your staff, when you host an event, whether virtually or in real time, in real life, whether you are designing and developing a new sponsorship or membership experience. All of these things are experiences that you are having and experiences which can be designed, which is why, as you can see in the second bullet point, this thinking framework immediately becomes broadly and repeatably applicable. Rather than figuring out different frameworks or different models or different approaches for one area of your life or your organization versus another, or hiring in multitudes of consultants who can help you with a specific membership problem or sponsorship problem or trade show problem or board structure problem. Experience design thinking is intended to give you a model through which you can put any unsolvable problem to design an experience that will bring you to a dream solution. Now, how do we do this? Well, as I mentioned, it's an inversion entirely of what we have been taught for most of our lives, mine included. And this is where people initially feel a bit of hesitation when I start to talk about feeling first and thinking second. But let me help you understand briefly why I think this is so critical and frankly, why I know it works. If we're talking about thinking first, and we use the analogy of making a journey from destination A to destination B, I need to get from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, California. If I'm thinking it through analytically, I will book a specific flight or I will take a specific route. I will leave at a specific time, and in order to get there, I will have to be in several places by other specific times. If even one slight thing goes wrong, I'm immediately thrown off my game and perhaps consider myself having failed at making this return journey. So in the instance that my rental car breaks down and I'm not able to make that flight and then I miss it and I'm stuck in point A and I can't get to point B in time, basically my experience is nowhere near the dream experience I was hoping to have. And I'm really back into analytics, all the while feeling probably worse and worse. Inversely, if I think about my feelings first and how I want to feel about that experience and say, what's important to me, yes, of course, is getting from Washington to San Francisco, but what's important is that my experience all along the way is one where I feel relaxed and at ease, and that the experience is simple and straightforward. All of a sudden, there are a multitude of options available to me to be successful because my metrics for success all along the journey and the design of my experience are based around how I feel first. Now, in this example, it may seem like there's an unlikely connection between solving an unsolvable problem at a business level and making a trip from destination A to B, but I promise you, you're going to see in the next few minutes here how, in fact, that is not the case. When I understand how I feel or how I want to feel about the design of an experience, I can make my way toward a solution that I am absolutely excited to work on, not only getting to that dream solution, but also enjoying the experience all along the way because I have designed it and continue to design it to elicit and evoke those feelings that matter most to me. So let's take a look at what our GNA framework includes and how we start to put this feeling, then thinking framework into action. As I said, define the dream, design the dream is quite intentional. And it is that way because if we are unable to give ourselves permission to define the dream solution to our unsolvable problem exactly as we want it to feel, then there's absolutely no way we're going to get there. Okay. If I don't believe that my journey from Washington to San Francisco can feel easy and simple and relaxed and comfortable, and I instead believe that sometimes things just go wrong and you just have to bite the bullet and get through it, then guess what kind of experience I'm going to have as I make that journey from point A to point B? It's not going to be great. I'll get there, but I probably won't enjoy it. Similarly, as I define a dream experience solving any other type of unsolvable problem, if I'm not even able to dream about a scenario in which it feels great and the outcome feels and looks like a dream to me, how will I ever get there? Okay. So we take our clients, whether they're organizational or individual, through 4 simple steps, although in their simplicity, there's quite a bit to learn. First is discover. That's where we shift your paradigm. And we've talked about what that inversion looks like, but we'll get into it more in just a minute. Next is define. This is where we actually define what a dream experience looks like, and we give people the opportunity to practice building their skills at allowing themselves to use their new paradigm in order to drive their actions and activities. You'll see that as well today. Then comes discard, which is a critical phase. It's one where we identify not only the surface level beliefs that are impeding our progress towards designing this dream experience, but also some of the subconscious ones as well. And we won't have an opportunity to get into that too much today, but I promise you this is a critical one, because this is where so often folks will immediately start to discredit and discount those dream experiences. They'll start to say things like, it's not realistic to have fun and put together a really good board meeting. Or something even more frequently heard, my board doesn't want a fun board meeting. That's not the type of people they are, right? That seems like a realistic statement, but again, if we aren't able to figure out why it's probably not true, and it never is, and discard it, then there's no way that we're going to be able to design your dream experience, in this case, perhaps a really fun and productive meeting with your board. Last is our design phase. And this is where, if we are working directly with clients, we take all of the information they've given us in the first 3 phases and put together a comprehensive experience design plan based on how they want the experience to feel, not only when they get to their destination, but all along the way. If we're teaching someone or a group of individuals how to do this, we walk them through how to design that plan themselves. Essentially, this is the step in which we map out something where we transform an unsolvable problem into a workable solution with clear steps and directions on how to get from point A to point B. So for the balance of our presentation today, we're going to focus largely on an overview of step 1 with hints of step 2, because as you might imagine, 45 to 60 minutes isn't enough time to dive deeply into all 4 phases. But fear not, as I mentioned, we're going to give you plenty of opportunities to get in touch with us if, and I hope it is true, you are interested in learning more about our 4D framework. So, what is the most important step to solving your unsolvable problem, no matter what it is? Well, not surprisingly, based on what I've shared to this point, it is first and foremost defining how you would like your dream solution to feel. You have to get clear on what it's going to feel like, and let me explain why. When we believe that we need to solve an unsolvable problem, often it is because we yearn for the feelings that we think solving that unsolvable problem will generate for us. Now, at an organizational level, do we ever often say this out loud? No, not really. As an executive director, you're not likely walking around going, once I know how to fix my membership, I will finally feel a sense of relief. But raise your hand at home if that isn't exactly what you are feeling. I will feel relief. I will feel ease. I will feel freedom to be creative in other ways. I will feel some different feelings than the ones I have now once I solve this problem. And what I offer you today is that inverting that ideology is key to designing experiences that not only solve your unsolvable problems, but that allow you to create wonderful journeys along the way. Okay? So, What does that look like in practical application? Well, as you can see here on our diagram to the left, our old framework is conditional. It says, once I solve the conference problem, the flagging revenue problem, the sales and sponsorship strategy problem, the dated or perhaps uninspiring marketing problem, I will finally feel this way, or my team will feel this way, or whatever it is, right? It's very conditional based on solving something in a very narrow way, getting from DC to San Francisco on one flight that leaves at one time. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the foundational shift of the paradigm that is the foundation of our 4D model, which is once I define how I want the experience to feel, in this example, perhaps welcoming, not only can I hold up the problem and transform it into a workable solution whereby I can simply be asking, how do I create a conference experience that feels welcoming? And how do I create an experience designing all along the way that is welcoming as well? How do I transform marketing so that it is welcoming? If I want my team to feel more welcome on a day-to-day basis, what does that look like? All of a sudden, we are no longer operating from a conditional paradigm. Nothing external to me or to my organization has to change in order for me to begin designing an experience that generates the outcome, which is the feeling that I am intending to feel. And I guarantee you, because we've done it enough to know that when we focus this way, the results follow like night follows day. So how does this look in a practical approach? Well, let's see. So if I am considering how to design a membership experience, initially in the old model, I may have looked very hard at analytical information and logistics in order to drive the redesign or completely new design of a membership experience. And I want to be clear that there's nothing wrong with, and in fact, I am a big fan of data. At the right time, using data appropriately is absolutely critical to making sure that you're getting what you need informationally to substantiate the ideas that you have. However, starting in that logical and analytical process isn't as successful as people hope. And although I know this from experience, what I can share with you is that you know it too, or all of the work that you've done using that paradigm would have already gotten you the outcomes that you're desirous of. Your membership model would be killing it, right? You would be recruiting a bunch of new members, younger professionals, whatever that goal is, or your conference would be on fire. You would be grabbing all kinds of new revenue. The team would be loving every day at the office or pretty close, right? Driving decision-making and problem solving with data and logic is great once you know how you want the experience of that problem solving solution working to feel. So instead of saying we need to look at research and outreach and planning first, and then we'll be happy once we've redesigned a successful membership experience, we shift that paradigm. We take it from a conditional paradigm where something has to happen before I can feel a certain way, in this case, passionate, and we say, no, passionate is at the core of how I want to feel. With our clients, we take it a step further, and while it can seem a little bit unusual at first, we ask them to come up with vivid descriptions of what these feelings mean. So here you can see, I want to feel on fire for our reimagined member experience, like a little kid who's learning about a new subject that they love. I want to be thrilled to investigate, build, and deliver this new program. And the reason we get so vivid with the description is because that description is very easy to hold up an experiential design component, a touch point to, and say, does doing this feel this way or not? It's a lot simpler to be specific and to understand what you're driving towards than to say, choose something like, I want to feel happy, or I want to feel good, with no description behind it. It's tougher to understand whether you're eliciting those feelings in the design of an experience if they're so general and vague. So once we have this adjective, and often it's multiple adjectives, usually somewhere between 5 to 7 in place, then we start looking at all of these touch points that go into designing an experience. And here we're just getting a small sampling of them. But of course, if you're designing a new membership experience, you're going to have to do research. Instead of reading things that are perhaps yawn-worthy, if you're a medical society, digging into medical reading or adjacent fields that are exciting to you, looking at other business models, investigating perhaps things that are totally unrelated but that you are passionate about as a way to get inspiration for how to design a membership experience that is going to work for your organization. Similarly, you might daydream. You might just give yourself an opportunity to say, what would I be so excited and passionate to roll out? I don't need to know how it all comes together. I don't need to know how the data works just yet. For now, I'm focused on creating an experience that I'm passionate about. So let me daydream. Similarly with outreach, oftentimes our clients will say, but I have to get in touch with all these member segments, or I have to talk to these people. I don't really like them. When their emails pop up, it kind of makes me cringe, but they're so important. But if you want the experience not only of putting the program together, but also the program itself to feel passionate and exciting and something like what you really can get behind, then reach out to members who have that same experience with you. People who you love talking to, people who you know are invigorated about new ideas or who are thrilled to look at alternative ways to get work done. Use those people as your litmus test first and foremost. Use their energy and piggyback off of them in order to bring others along, or simply to finally recognize that perhaps instead of trying to bring along the naysayers and the detractors, you can finally move forward with people who are just interested in being in an experience that they are passionate about just as you are. Perhaps you're going to look at organizations who you'd be thrilled to hear back from. Maybe you really want to reach out to Amazon Health or Google Health. Perhaps if you heard back from some organization completely outside of the healthcare and medical field, that was one that you admired how they did business, you reach out to them. Does it mean that you're going to get an answer back from everyone? No, not necessarily, but you're sure passionate about the outreach, and you're sure passionate about the conversation about the outreach, and you're sure transmitting that energy to others all along the way. Last is planning. Perhaps you're starting to use language that you're passionate about. Rather than rolling out the same weekly meeting with the same agenda and the same rigmarole about going around the room and giving updates, you're asking for people to talk about things that they're passionate about as a part of this process. You're introducing invitations to volunteers and to staff that have a different ring, a different tone to them overall, one that you're excited to use in your day-to-day interactions. And perhaps as you take it even further, you're doing the same with the members who you're inviting to have this new experience with you, okay? Now, this is a short example, and clearly there's much more that goes into designing an experience using this format. However, this can kind of wet your whistle as to how you start to carry through feelings first and solutions second, and how we don't lose sight of the end goal, nor do we ignore collecting data and information critical to helping us move along our path, but how we can do it in such a way that we're designing an experience in a different frame of mind. Okay, so what do we do next, and how do we start to figure out what these adjectives and touch points could be? Well, an exercise that we take people through is to start using 3 daily lists: love to do, love to feel, and get to do. And I encourage you to start with these on an individual level, because frankly, if you're not used to thinking this way, it's going to be very difficult to go from a mindset throughout your day-to-day activities for 80 to 90% of your day that is analytical, problem solving first, action first, feelings are somewhere out in the ether, to one that is feelings oriented first and foremost, only when you're trying to solve this unsolvable problem. How does it look? Well, you start by listing things you love to do, and you get real specific. It doesn't have to relate to work. It doesn't have to be something you do all the time, but it's something that if you woke up out of bed in the morning and knew it was on your schedule, you would be absolutely jumping with joy to take your day by the horns and jump into life, okay? Make a list of those things first and don't hold back. Next, make a list of how you love to feel when you're doing those things. So for me, if I get up out of bed and know that I'm about to get on a plane to go somewhere new, I am thrilled. I am energized. I am electrified. I am exhilarated, right? That feels like how I love to feel. Those are very clear-cut adjectives. Be specific and list 2 to 3 adjectives for each love to do item on your first list. Get yourself a nice full list of adjectives. And then thirdly, take those adjectives into your get-to-do list on a daily basis. So whether or not you're even looking at that unsolvable problem, whether or not your get-to-do list includes that unsolvable problem on a day-to-day basis, you can apply the same process to start shifting your paradigm for the things you get to do on a given day. For example, your morning routine. And I start with this one because everyone has one, okay? So your morning routine may currently feel like nothing inspiring at all. It may feel like kind of robotic or automated, or perhaps you've never even really thought about it. But if you have some love to feel adjectives like I did, so if I say I want to wake up on a given day and focus on feeling exhilarated, designing experiences that to me feel energizing, perhaps even electrifying. And I start to look at my morning routine and think about how could I create or design an experience this morning that evokes more of those feelings of energizing and exciting and electrifying. Well, perhaps I get out of bed and put on some music or put on something that really gets me going in the morning. Perhaps I start with a nice cup of coffee that I have intentionally made my first point of order for the morning rather than zipping through a drive-through or grabbing one on the way into my virtual office, right? Perhaps I'm doing something where I'm taking a bit of time to read or to write or to do another activity, even if it's only for a few minutes, that gives me more energy than I would have otherwise had when I just was on autopilot and not designing an experience, but rather just allowing the experience to happen, okay? So we take these adjectives and we start by applying them to the things we get to do every day. Those can look like things in your personal life or your home life. They can also look like things such as how I want to go into a particular meeting, how I want to bring a particular type of feeling into my communications via email today, how I perhaps want to structure the rest of my day, how I want to interact with my colleagues or my staff or my volunteers. All of these are different get-to-do items that we get to do on a daily basis. Technically, we don't have to do any of them, right? No one ever does. But we often think we do because we aren't intentional about getting clear on the feelings that we want to have and then using those feelings to drive the experiences that we have from moment to moment, day to day. So I encourage everyone to start with these three lists first and foremost so that you can build your individual muscle, shifting your paradigm to a feelings first orientation. As you start to build that muscle, it then becomes easier to start to involve things that are more complex, perhaps some of your unsolvable problems. And as you might imagine, when we take clients through this process, we do so with a number of additional activities and a number of additional opportunities for them to build these muscles, to get clarity, and to show them examples or provide them with clear direction on where and how to apply this love to do, love to feel, and get to do list in a much more specific and oriented way toward an unsolvable problem of their choosing. All right. A couple last tips for success should you choose to use these daily lists, and I certainly strongly encourage you to do so. Be 150% honest about exactly what it is that you love to do and what those things you love to do make you feel. As I mentioned in our previous example, if I'm very general or if I'm quite limited, for example, saying I want to feel good or I feel good when I read, that's a tough place to start from because it's pretty general and it's hard to ascertain whether or not you can feel the same feeling as reading and when it makes you feel good when you're, say, building an agenda for your next volunteer committee meeting. If, however, you were to get really specific and say, I love Harry Potter, and when I read Harry Potter or when I watch those movies, I feel magical, I feel alive, I feel like a breath of fresh air, right? Those are some kind of off the wall adjectives. But if you get very clear about what it is you love and how it makes you feel, and really, really specific, and you're very honest about it, it becomes much easier to understand whether or not doing something gives you that same breath of fresh air feeling, where you feel really alive and invigorated when you're doing it. And you can slowly start to move the needle more and more in the direction of your actual desired feelings, okay? Second tip, As I said, begin with exactly what you get to do each day. Starting small when you're trying to shift a paradigm, like we're discussing doing today, is really powerful. Because as you start to see those smaller, incremental, and sometimes seemingly trivial wins racking up, you're building momentum. You're building that paradigm shifting muscle. And so when you bring the same skill to bear on seemingly larger or more important problems, although I would argue that they're all the same in the end, but that's for another presentation, you are already well versed. You have started to build a really, really strong skill set, and it doesn't feel so foreign to try to switch gears and use this framework only on one area of your life. Okay, so I strongly encourage you to take even 5 minutes a day to start using these daily lists as a way to begin shifting your paradigm and solving your unsolvable problems by designing new experiences on an incremental and daily basis to start. So, where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us back at our doing objectives. As I mentioned, today was simply an overview of the first two phases of our 4D model. We did define experience design thinking, and you can too. You can talk about how it applies to any experience, no matter what sector you're in, whether it's personal or professional, or how it orients within the day-to-day operations of an organization or one's individual life. You can also explain that experience design thinking is a framework which is broadly and repeatedly applicable. And you know that it is inherently based on a foundational shift from thinking first and solutions first to feelings second. The conditional experience where something has to change external to me or my organization before we can feel a certain way. To feelings first, solutions second. When I know how I feel or how I want to feel, I can then design experiences that generate those feelings, not only for me, but also for whomever may benefit from the experience being designed. Members, customers, sponsors, staff, you name it, right? You understand and can describe the 4 steps of GNA's Define the Dream, Design the Dream, Experience Design Thinking framework. We went through the discovery phase, that foundational shift in the paradigm, the define phase, an overview of how we start to define our dream experience and why it's so important. And we briefly touched on phase 3, discard, where we look at where those impeding beliefs exist, and not only the superficial ones, but some that are often much more deeply ingrained in our thinking and acting on a day-to-day basis. And last, phase 4, the design phase, where we transform those unsolvable problems into workable solutions. So while we only started to explore in more detail phases 1 and 2, you can describe the 4 steps in our 4D model. You can also explain the paradigm shift at the core of the framework. As I mentioned, it's going from solutions and logic first and feelings second, to feelings first, solutions second. And last, we have discussed a few examples of the 4D framework in action. So you heard me use the example of my own life and how I transformed it from one where I was working an insane amount, really not slowing down and enjoying anything, and basically just getting by because I had allowed the experience to exist pretty much free from any design component at all, to a completely different experience that I'm having now, doing work I love with clients I love, and working in a way that is designed to suit the experience and the feelings I am desirous of for myself. You also heard me give the example of the membership redesign and how we could use a feelings first approach to take that process through some of its initial phases. And you heard me use the analogy of a tale of 2 trips, from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco via the thinking first model, where we have to hit a specific series of actions and points in time in order to be successful, to a feelings first model, where I want the trip to be easy and comfortable and straightforward. So you do know how to discuss a few examples of this 4D framework in action, all right? So where does that leave us? Well, here's what I would suggest if we were in a room together and you asked me, where do I go from here? First and foremost, I would commit 5 minutes a day to drafting daily lists to build that paradigm shift muscle. I touched on that a number of times because it is really critical. It is almost impossible to go from no physical activity to running a marathon. While it's doable, it's extremely difficult. You have to train over time and you have to build that muscle or those muscles by taking it incrementally at first and then using that incremental success to build upon itself. This is no different. If you start with your daily experiences and those 3 daily lists and you look for incremental ways to begin shifting your paradigm on a day-to-day basis, slowly but surely, you'll be ready to quote unquote run the marathon. All right. How do you do that? Well, you may start by applying it to your daily get to-dos and then slowly transition into using the same love to feel adjectives to precisely describe how the dream solution to your unsolvable problem would feel. You can use the same lists that we saw in the example of the membership redesign, similar lists where you're starting small, using those love to feel adjectives, and then beginning to create daily dream experiences that are helping you to make progress along the way. Beyond those action items, what else might be a next step for you? Well, I would strongly suggest that if you've enjoyed this and you're interested and you want to learn more, that you get in touch. I've provided a number of different communication options here for you. As I said, we take clients through this on a one-on-one basis, one organization at a time. We also offer a course that helps individuals, whether it's you or your staff or perhaps even some of your volunteers, learn how to apply this thinking framework through a series of activities that will teach them how to take any unsolvable problem through our XD framework and transform it into a workable solution. So, with that said, we've gone ahead and touched on all of the information available in our first introduction to GNA's Experience Design Thinking Framework today. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come into your home or your home office or your coffee shop and to teach you about something that I personally love, and that is something I am passionate about and get to design and experience around on a day-to-day basis. Once again, my name is Mal Gott. I am the founder and creative director of GNA, an experiential design firm. And as I say to all of my clients and all of my friends, when I sign off on a formal presentation like this, I hope that you dream boldly and you dream beautifully, because you deserve to have the experience designed exactly the way that you want it to be. Thank you again so much for your time today. I wish you all the best and I look forward to hearing from you soon.